Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We have a very timely and important conversation today with Dr. Paolo Beconcini.
Yes.
And I had to switch into my Italian.
No matter how you say it, it works.
To be able to say that effectively or reasonably effectively. One of the maybe surprising things about Paolo is that he is a China expert. He spent 18 years in China, and more than that, working with China. He's based in Orange County. He has a team in Shanghai, and he works on a daily basis on intellectual property and other legal issues related to companies working in China. So he knows the country, knows the laws, knows business inside and out relative to being successful and not successful, probably in China as well. And so the reason why that's timely is there's certainly a lot of challenges today between certainly the US, China, and actually many other countries and China relationship. And that creates then for every business wanting to go after the market, challenges to make sure that you're doing the things right. When we were talking the other day in preparation for this, Paolo was talking about not just some of the challenges and barriers that the Chinese government sets up, but even more importantly, the lack of knowledge and maybe making mistakes by companies, not just US companies, but other companies in China, creates heartache and worse. And in fact, he was saying that's usually the problem. It's less the Chinese government and more often it's lack of understanding of what you really need to do. And so we're going to go through some of those things, certainly some of the challenges so that you can avoid those. And then of course, some of the opportunities for you as a business. The title of the program is Protection of IP or Intellectual Property Rights in China in Light of Trade and Tech Conflicts. I've already mentioned that Paolo is a consultant with Squire, Patton, Boggs, based in Orange County, so basically the Los Angeles basin area, but working in China. Paolo, really appreciate you taking the time. I know how precious time is for everyone, and especially you. You do some amazing work, and so we're really looking forward to hearing more today about how we can be more successful in China. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you, Doug. Thank you to the Global Chamber. I'm always excited to talk about China, and there is a hype, of course, since 2018, there's a hype about China, you know, the trade wars and the tech now more currently the tech wars. They brought China back again on TV and on the news, and sometimes even for us experts, China experts, and there's many, of course, I know many European and Americans that are very knowledgeable about China. They always wonder, right, what's going on? It's so overwhelming sometimes, the amount of information. Then I think we need to make sense of what's going on. And in my particular field, which is intellectual property, there have been so many changes in the last couple of years in the landscape, in the application and enforcement of the law that sometimes I say I need to pause and try to figure out what's going on. And I'm the first one that needs to do this. And maybe talking with you guys helps me and help you figure out where we're going, where we're heading. Is it going to get better? And now I'm going to share some slides. I'm not going to say anything else about myself because Doug did already the intro. If you want to dig out more about me, unfortunately, I'm there. So Google me and you'll see everything. I'm pretty naked there, professionally speaking. So nothing that you can't find online already, books and articles and everything. So
I think the better English word might be transparent.
Yeah, because I was reading a book called The Naked Communist, and you know, so the word naked stuck. All right.
That's funny. Thank you. Go ahead.
So, yeah, and let's go. Let me see if I can manage now this to be able to move the slides. You know, I always start with questions, and just as I said, what is the state of IP, intellectual property in China right now, and in light of all the turmoil that we have witnessed since 2018, and I put 2018 as a formal start, but obviously the turmoil, as you will see, it's dating much earlier than that. But obviously we witnessed an escalation in the relation, and how did this affect intellectual property and in China and its enforcement. And to do this, I'll need to give you some historical introduction, and I love history. So for me, I could spend hours just talking about that. But I think some background, a quick background, will help position IP within all these China policies that we're hearing about, and then check again, what are the challenges? Are the same challenges we used to have before? Are the new challenges that emerged since the recent turns of Xi Jinping policies affecting intellectual property as well? So I'll try to cover this try to answer these two questions and cover these points. Instead of the usual presentation of talking about, how is the IP system in China, all the little legal details, I'll try to touch on experience and give some information about that, but I want to keep the picture a little bit bigger, because the audience may be composed of people with different backgrounds, and maybe some don't know too much about IP, many know a lot about it. So I try to strike a balance in between. So the historical context: there was no IP in China, or just in the modern sense, until the death of Mao Zedong and the end of the Cultural Revolution. So with the new leadership coming up in the end of the 70s, and in particular the leadership led by Deng Xiaoping, China, they took stock of the misery caused by the Cultural Revolution and all our previous political experiments of the Mao era, like the Great Leap Forward, and they realized we need to get this country out of poverty, and we need to be socialist and Marxist, Leninist at the same time. So we invented something that is called socialism with Chinese characteristics, and this is what Deng Xiaoping invented somewhat. It was a slogan. So that meant that China, remaining a communist country led by the Communist Party, it started to introduce market reforms. So it started to open and reform its system into a market system and open into the world. And in this context, IP was necessary because, as many other laws, it was one of the guarantees that the Chinese were giving to the West, that if you come invest the money here, we'll give you legal protection, so you can invest your money safely. So IP was instrumental to build up what we have come to know as China's wall factory. Okay, so China Walls Factory was the model of economic growth and development of China from 1979 approximately on, and IP was instrumental, one of the a little one compared to others, but one of the many instruments, legal instruments, used to provide guarantee to foreign investors. So the result was like, do I need IP as a Chinese? Probably, I don't know, but I definitely need to incorporate in my legal system the best practices I can find around the world, so that I can offer to foreigners some level of protection. So there was a time where China was inoculating. We could, talking about in a COVID-19 terms, it was experimenting a vaccine. It was inoculating a lot of vaccines in its body. And as all foreign bodies, they can create reactions and rejections. So we experienced for many years introduction of the first trademark law, the first patent law, the first copyright law, the first anti-unfair competition law. And it was a trial and error. It was like a 3-step forward and 4 steps back, or 3 steps back, because you were inoculating Western legal instruments, mostly dictated by international standards. And they were, since 1979, the US in particular started pushing China very hardly to adopt international IP legal standards, and they were signing memorandum of understandings and agreements and China was willing to do that. But obviously you were inserting modern legal concept. And I would say the first one was even the concept of property itself. There was obviously contrary to what had been in the past for China. There was no property, and now suddenly you create ownership. You can ownership of rights, ownership of property to a certain extent, even if an immaterial type of property. So this obviously characterized the first years of development, and you had laws that were introduced but were applied in a very messy way. Imagine that today, and we'll see this later, today we have IP courts in China. Judges that speak English, they have studied abroad, they handle hundreds of cases a year on IP, so super experienced, super technical. But at the time when IP was introduced in China, judges were maybe someone who had distinguished itself in some battle in the Sino-Japanese War, and as a soldier, not even maybe a general, but just an officer or whatever soldier, or a good communist who had well behaved in the party and done great during the Great Leap Forward, all the Cultural Revolution, and had somewhat gained a spot on a court bench. So and you had at the same time a very primitive and unorganized administrative system. So all this led to a very inconsistent application of the law and a back and forth between the US, China, or let's say the Western communities in China. Reform this, do it better. So Beijing, you must better control, you must better implement the laws, you must better enforce the IP rights, etc., etc. So it was, and then Chinese were doing something, moving forward, trying to make some improvements, but so many more were needed. So was this back and forth. Another big step for China was the WTO access in 2001. China stepped up its commitment to be part of the global economic system by that accession, and agreed to even higher standards of IP protection through the signing of the WTO collateral IP agreements that were, it's called TRIPS, and this TRIPS, it requires China really to step up the work. From that moment on, from 2001 and on, the more modern versions of all the laws that we have today were started to be implemented. And we saw a more active role of the Supreme People's Court, which is the comparable to the US. It would be like the US Supreme Court, stepping in, giving interpretations, and trying to rationalize, modernize the application of the law and making it more consistent. We started to see, the use of internet to compile court decisions, regulatory decisions, etc. So it started to get more modern, but at the same time, the old problems remained, especially the faulty implementation. And a topic that recurs, and even it's one of the issues that challenges today, it was always this hiatus between Beijing and the rest of the country. In Beijing, you made a lot of new law, you comply with international standards, you give in to US pressure, but then when it goes to the application on the local level, things change, it goes astray. Okay, this was the pattern that was established, but all was again very functional to have IP serving China's world factories policies. Now they wanted to grow economically quickly, and IP was one of the tools to support in foreign investments. It wasn't made for China itself. IP was a face for foreigners to come and put the money in China. Then what happened in its application, maybe Chinese lost interest as long as someone had invested.
Hello?
Yeah?
Could I just interrupt for a second? Is
Yes,
there a smoke detector going off in the background there?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. And as I explained before, I had internet problems, so I had to leave my office this morning and work in another room. I'm sorry, I apologize for the noise.
Okay. No worries. So, and the other thing I wanted to check on, we're now seeing the picture of the slide Socialism with Chinese characters.
Yes, you're still there.
Okay,
And I'm
very good.
moving now to the next one.
Just double checking. Thanks, Bill,
Yes.
for the tickle. Appreciate it.
Yes, yeah, there was on one of the slides where I was going to invest more time because it was giving me the background of the situation. So now with Xi Jinping coming to power in 2012, in November 2012, China took a big turn. Xi Jinping, he did many reforms. Of course, there are a lot of aspects I'm not going to touch upon. Of course, this is not part of our discussion today. The anti-corruption campaign, the taking hold of the Communist Party, discipline, cleaning up from corruption. That he realized that the Communist Party has lost touch with the people in the previous years, and he realized there was, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, he realized China was a high risk. So he started to implement a lot of policies that were giving back to the Communist Party centrality in the economic processes and not only in the political one. And this obviously affected intellectual property as well. And I would say that the biggest turn concerning intellectual property, speaking of IP, it was the fact that he started switching the major growth and development policies of China from going from the China as a global factory to China as an independent innovator and a technological power. So China wanting to win against centrality, becoming a country that would influence the rest of the world. And from the political side, his socialism with Chinese characteristic in the new era, as this called his policy, which is now integral part of the Communist Party constitution and the Chinese constitution, is that innovation is a driver and technology predominance is a driver. So how does these new policies affect intellectual property? Well, first of all, you need to look at the major goals, and I just said, leapfrog the US as a technology economic power, acquire military predominance, or at least get on the same level with the United States, keep the opening policies towards friendly countries, towards those countries that are friendly to China, and they can increase relation with China, because China wants now to export its model to developing countries, its political model, this socialism with Chinese characteristics, as in conflict with the democratic capitalistic system, to be a system that goes and can be exported to other countries, and increase engagement in international institutions to bring China to influence the global making of laws, including international intellectual property laws. This and IP has been therefore given a lot of tasks. Intellectual property suddenly went from being functional to lure investors into China. With Xi Jinping, it took new meanings. And in a speech in November last year, he listed a bunch of these functions of IP. And the first one was IP should be supporting innovation. IP should be the engine that brings innovation forward. IP should change from quantity to quality. IP shall protect national security. That means, for example, tightening the patentability, for example, of inventions that have been created in China, tightening them to China and reducing the possibilities for a foreign company who developed an invention in China to bring it abroad or filing it abroad. So this is, it's the scrutiny of national security interest in patent processes, for example, right now in China has been heightened. So it's definitely a big effect that has been given to IP. And IP is used to reduce reliance on foreign technologies. And for example, many of you have heard how China now is becoming more and more predominant in the standardization processes for technologies, especially on fields where China is very strong or is growing strongly, because they want to be more self-reliant technologically and be at the forefront of technological development. So this is definitely a challenge to the West. Example of the assertiveness of China, a recent example are, for example, those decisions on anti-suit injunctions, which is a very complicated and technical issue. Myself, I need time and concentration to study it. I'm not a specialist on the patent standards myself, so I have to, you can't be specialist on everything in life. And it's a complex issues, but definitely China and the China courts are issuing judgments, their conflict with American or German or French judgments on critical royalty agreements or license agreements for certain telecommunication technologies or digital technologies, for example, which make China very assertive and showing that now we are here to dictate also what the changes and how the law will move in the future. It's not only passively receiving the laws from other countries. So you see the shift from the previous era to the current state. Many other examples, how they impose certain restrictions on patent licensing in China. Now they start to punish more severely, in response to cyber regulations in the US, trying to reduce the impact of hacking from other countries. China is doing the same, showing, if you punish Chinese people, we will punish foreigners here in China when they try to steal trade secrets. So increasing the punishment, restriction of foreign filing licenses. This is a very important topic for all those foreign companies that develop inventions with Chinese partners. So, and if the invention is determined to be having completed in China, the Chinese law requires you now to file the patent in China first. So this is very disruptive for the foreign owners of the technology who decided to develop it in China. And it forces him to, for example, undergo complex procedures in order to obtain first filing and being able to file it in the US rather than China first. And those things, as technical as they may seem, have a very big impact on how patents are exploited economically, licensed, and protected globally. So we have seen also escalations in regard to sanctions, like US and the EU has issued sanctions against Chinese individuals and companies in relations of, we know, the trade wars and tech wars, and Chinese have fought back by relieving the Chinese counterpart from having to comply with these sanctions and even giving them claims rights against those sanctions. And this can involve IP claims as well. So, and recently I saw that the EU was trying to conclude cooperation as agreement on joint developments and research in several important fields like artificial intelligence with China, but they were very reluctant to conclude this agreement, waiting for China to give more guarantees on joint ownership of IP rights. But China has so far refused to come towards the European counterpart and give those guarantees. So it shows the assertiveness of China on this field, because they feel stronger, and they definitely are stronger than they used to be. And they're playing a new role, and you see IP is turning, really the function of the tool is turning into more assertive tool of China long-term strategic development goals. Okay. So summarizing, what are the grievances? More or less, I must say, many of them are the same. If I look at I start from the bottom, if you look about insufficient enforcement of IP rights, especially counterfeiting, tolerating the tolerance, or at least the insufficient tackling of trademark patent theft, patent licensing obligation. These complaints existed already for many decades. I would say other complaints that already existed, of course, but now I think they become more acute are the theft of foreign trade secrets, through cyber espionage, for example, and the forced technology transfer. I'll talk about these two topics very quickly, very soon. So all these grievances, as I said before, the US have had a lot of grievances in the last 50, 60 years with China IP. There have been several WTO proceedings initiated by the US against China in the past. The latest one were in 2018. They started the trade war. The things are, the trade war were came to a stop officially, and especially the IP part of those came to an end on January 15, 2020, with the China-US trade agreement, the phase 1 of the agreement. The situation, however, kept escalating to the point that, now we have the tech war, the listing of Chinese tech companies, the restrictions on certain technologies export and stuff, to the point that all this escalation in 2020 and 21 the result is that we don't have a phase 2 right now. There's no phase 2 agreement in sight. So we have only a phase 1 agreement, which had an impact, in my opinion, on China, and I will see in the next slide. And this agreement, I would say, I put it, I draw a line. This is an important agreement because, unlike in the past, I would say China reacted more forcibly to this agreement by implementing many of the commitments they took. At the same time, strategically, others were not met. And I want to give you an example. If we go on a trade secret side, because I said before, trade secret theft is really one of the hot topics now in all the discussions, US-China, EU, US-China discussions on IP. And in the agreement, China took a number of commitments, for example, to extend the base of defining who is the right holder of trade secrets. Imagine in the past, only companies could hold trade secrets and not individuals. Now the things have changed because China implemented already before the trade agreement a new anti-unfair competition law where they amended a lot of the trade secret related regulations and complied with the demands. And therefore, in some cases, China even anticipated the trade agreement. Already during the trade war, China started, under pressure from the US, started improving and implementing some of those demands that weren't, again, formalized in the agreement. Same with the hacking. Hacking wasn't a form of trade secret infringement in the past, but from 2019, now in China also, we have hacking as an infringement of trade secrets. Shifting of burden of proof, reducing the burden for foreigners, right holders, to prove a theft of trade secret. Checked. Well, we had this done in September 2020. So you see, January of 2020 was the agreement. By September, a very important piece of the puzzle was added to the Chinese law. Same from injunctions and preventive measures. They were even actually adopted even earlier than 2020. So reduce the threshold for criminal punishment. So increase the number of criminal cases or increase the accessibility of criminal enforcement for trade secret infringement. Checked, it was fulfilled also in September 2020. So now, technically, theoretically, we will have to see over a certain period of time, we should see an increase of criminal cases concerning trade secret infringement. And we want to see more foreigners go in and use these tools because they are there right now. Rather, because many tend to say, okay, I'll sue in the US. I have so many laws. I have the Trade Secret Act there. I have other state regulations, etc. I have the ITC. But at the end of the day, if the people that still are in China, you won't really do anything to them unless you attack them there. The same you can say for trademark infringement, patent infringement. So at the end of the day, you need to trust the Chinese system. And I can tell you for trade secret, it was so bad before. It was one of the worst, the worst rights to enforce in China. Now it's much better. The only thing they didn't implement is the unauthorized disclosure by government authorities. This is a very critical point because it happens that during an homologation or certification process with a Chinese authority, you may be requested to give information, and some of them are trade secrets. And what happens if public officials in China decides to sell your secrets to a competitor for money? It could happen, technically, it's possible. And there's no regulation to punish this behavior. So this is something very worrisome. So you see, a lot has been implemented, a lot has been done, but a lot has not yet been accomplished. Same if you look at forced technology transfer. China committed not to require or pressure US entities to transfer technology in relation to acquisition, joint ventures, other investment transaction. Was this implemented? Is there any new regulation in China that met this commitment with the US-China trade agreement? Not fulfilled. So it's a critical, very critical issue, because the moment you're forced to enter into a joint venture or into an investment in China, and you're forced to give certain information, you want to guarantee that it's protected, right? Same for cases where you need, I just said before, a license, an homologation, an import regulation. You may be required by an authority. And I meet these cases every day in my life, in my professional life, where clients come to me and say, they ask me technical drawings. I'm worried because there are some, trade secrets in there that I don't disclose to anybody. It's our way why we make that tolerance work, or etc. And it's a critical point. And should I give to them? Because if I don't give it to them, maybe they will refuse the license to me. So we need to help our clients navigate this, because there's no regulation, there's no liability there's no restrictions and no protections for us. I tell you the same for the case of information to show conformity with legal standards not fulfilled. What is the practical result? Is negotiating long, tiring negotiation with public officials, where we try to reduce the amount of information that we give out. And it's a lottery. It depends on the official, it depends on the mood, it depends on probably on their own agenda, whether we succeed or not. So this is something that remains a very challenging issue, and it's called forced technology transfer. Now, China, however, as I said, in 2020, kept reforming. And I would say the major reforms, it was in 2019, the trademark law, 2020, the patent and copyright law. There were many, many changes. I could go in details on all these changes, but I think my time is running up soon. So I'm just saying they started meeting a lot of the requirements. For example, in patents that compensate for technical delay in the patent granting. So they will, sometimes patent procedures can last so long that once the patent is granted, instead of having 20 years, you practically have 14 years left. So you lost 4 years of patent validity in delayed examinations. Now you can recover this time. Pharmaceutical patents have also seen major changes, positive changes, like terms extensions, the famous patent linkage, famous for the people who work in the pharmaceutical field, patent linkage provisions that, in spite of being still very foggy, because in China you have to know, you issue a law, the law is very general. It never gives you the full regulation. So you need to wait for implementing regulations with our administrative provisions. Then you need to wait court interpretations by the Supreme People's Court before you get to understand how the thing may play out in practice. And sometimes all these additional regulations and interpretations don't come at the same time as the law. They may come even a year or 2 years away from the law, because they will go through a process of trial and error, which may cause obviously some pains and tooth pains for the right holders. But all these things show positive improvements. I'm gonna go other improvements were increasing of damages, introduction of punitive damages, up to 5 times the actual loss or the illicit profit, for example, in case of intentional and serious infringement. And there's been an interpretation just of a month ago from the Supreme People's Court, who has interpreted the terms intentional and serious circumstances for the implementation of punitive damages in IP cases, for example. So these are all new regulations that they all meet demands and commitments that were taken in the US-China trade agreement. So it's definitely a positive change. Same I can say for trademark. One of the major plague of trademark has been trademark theft. We deal every day with squatters. Squatters are those people who professionally go and file your own trademarks before you do. In China, we have first to file. So it's not like in the US. In the US, you have common law trademarks. So you've been using it for a while. So you gain protection by the fact that you have been putting your trademark into commercial circulation. And in China, you don't have that. So either you file a trademark and you have it, or you don't file it and you don't have it. You can't even enforce it unless you prove that it's well known, which is a very high threshold of proof that is demanded from you. And therefore, you have, and in 2005, the trademark database went online. So in 2005, a new job was created, that of trademark thief or trademark squatter, because everybody could go online, check, your company online. Oh, nice company, this one. And then they were going to the database and see, oh, they didn't file any trademarks of them in China, so I'm going to do it. So, and if you didn't have a certain reputation and a certain prior use in China, you still nowadays may have difficulty to destroy that eliminate that prior filing. So what they did recently to address this issue, they introduced the abnormal filing ground for canceling a stolen trademark. That meaning that even if you had never been using your trademark in China, you're not known in China, as long as you can prove that that person is a collector of trademarks that is not using them, you can obtain an invalidation of the trademark. At the same time, you can file your own trademark and finally get it registered in China as well. So this is a very welcome modification. There's new things going on, like, for example, an increasing use of artificial intelligence in the trademark examination and in patent examination. In patent examination, artificial intelligence in China has been used like it is in US to screen novel patents, whether a patent has been used or disclosed, or invention has been used or disclosed in the past. And all these are improving the quality. At the same time, though, I want to tell you, for trademarks, I have a hard time to make my clients believe that a trademark examiner in China has about a couple of minutes to review your case, literally a couple of minutes. So it's because the workload is so big. China is the biggest trademark filing hotspot in the world. So their system is really under pressure, and the quality of decisions in China, it's horrible right now on trademarks. And normally it gets better in the proceeding as you go, when you get to the court, because the courts are kind of a bottleneck. They have more time, they have more less pressure, and they can make good decisions. But that means in the meantime, you have to spend money to get to that point and get your decision, bad decision, rectified, into a good one. But this said, there are improvements and things are getting better as they were compared to the way they were in the past. Again, in trademarks, we also have punitive damages. We have the increased amount of statutory damages. I don't know if you're familiar with the term statutory damages. Statutory damages are those whenever you cannot prove in China the amount of compensation you demand, because you can't prove your loss, you cannot prove the illicit profit of the counterpart, you tell the judge, decide it the way you think it's appropriate. So this is what statutory damages are. And the threshold of statutory damages has been increased in trademark law from 3 to 5 million. In patents, what 1 million now is 5 million renminbi. So obviously, having more damage compensation, higher damage compensations is an important step in China to make enforcement more effective. And they are meeting this requirement, these standards. And of course, other claims you can make have been improved. And it could be so many details I could talk about in practical cases, but there's no time. Same is for the copyright law. It's not enough time to cover copyright law right now, but you see I would say that the base of copyright law protection has expanded. Now it's easier to obtain copyright protection than it used to be before, because they have eliminated the strict categories of copyright. There are also, as I said before, a lot of interpretation in China. As I said, the law is very general. So what the Supreme People's Court says is very important, because they go into more details how the law applies. These are 3 examples of recent implementation that comply to the demands of the US trade agreement. But challenges remain. As I said before, the first one, as Doug introduced, is our lack of knowledge. And I don't blame it on China. I blame it on ourselves. For years, people say, oh, they squatted my trademark, they stole my trademark. But you need to know that China works on first to file. So you need to know that the moment you are going to do an international business, you need to consider China in your portfolio. Even if you do not produce in China, even if you do not market in China. Because how do you stop counterfeits, for example, at China customs if you don't have a trademark? And believe me, it is a very effective way to stop counterfeits. I run huge custom programs for clients, like in the fashion business, in the cosmetic business, and I have daily custom seizures. And I don't do anything. I sit at my desk and I receive Chinese customs notification. No, we stopped a container full of these products. Please confirm they're fakes. Yes, they're fake. They'll seize it. But you need to have a registered trademark to allow the custom to do that. And today, with the artificial intelligence and better digital tools, customs in China are very efficient. Like, imagine I register the client's trademarks. I register all their official supplies in China. So customs won't touch those. Those will go through smoothly. Those all the supply that comes from the OEM. But they will stop immediately anybody who's showing on the box the trademark who's not listed as an official OEM. And they'll notify immediately our firm that they stopped that container. But you need a trademark. You need a trademark registered in China and then registered with customs. So if you don't know this, you can't, not only you can't complain if someone squat your trademark, but you cannot even complain that that China doesn't offer sufficient enforcement, because you are missing already on using the tools they give to you to enforce. Same is for police enforcement. Same is for administrative enforcement of trademarks, for example. I do a lot of anti-counterfeiting. So I do run programs for large corporations and medium corporations, even sometimes in one lifetime case for smaller companies, small middle enterprises. And having a very good portfolio is important, and know how to enforce rights. There are solutions and there are no secrets, because I learned about them. Maybe, as Doug said, with bad experiences, I had to go through failure to learn, but it helps. And I know that there are ways to help. Definitely counterfeiting and overall quality of enforcement is still an issue, but is not as bad as it used to be. As I said before, now we have like IP courts of specialized judges, very technical, very good standard, very good level. You can build successful patent infringement cases, design patent infringement cases. In counterfeiting, it's a little bit more frustrating because it's the sheer amount of counterfeits that you want to stop that alone makes it almost impossible to succeed. At the same time, local protection still play a role, and as I'll mention in the last thing, trademark theft, we covered that. Trade secret theft, we covered that. Forced knowledge transfer and patent standards are still big challenges. Center versus periphery is still a fight. Beijing is one thing, the rest of the country is another thing. I can tell you, there are legendary places. I had a potential new client came to me asking me to do a miracle, to do something that I believe is a miracle. He wants to attack someone and build up a criminal case in a city that's called Shantou in eastern Guangdong province in the southeast of China. And everybody knows in my business that enforcing IP rights in Shantou, it's very difficult, if not impossible, because there's local protectionism. You say, before I said, China innovation, China independent development, China self-reliant on technology. Yeah, this is a lot of beautiful slogans. It's happening, it's moving into that direction. It will take decades though. And like it or not, China is still the world's factory. And Shantou, like Yiwu or Shenzhen City in Hebei province, is a very famous hubs for people like me, famous to people like me who do anti-counterfeiting. These are places where there's a huge local protectionism of the local OEM factories, because they still rely, as in 1979, on export to survive. to leave. And therefore, local protection still play an important role. I could tell you so many stories where I had to climb mirrors to get a police officer to enforce a trademark. Or what I do often, I try to convince the police 3,000 miles away in another city to go down there to enforce the trademark. And, because I rely on them because they're more transparent, they're more knowledgeable, like, for example, the police in Shanghai, and they may be willing to go to Shantou and enforce the trademarks. But you can imagine for them also it's very difficult because they'll have to convince the locals to cooperate, etc., etc. So these are issues that affect certain type of enforcement. At the same time, court enforcement is so much better thanks to the IP courts. And just to give you an idea, it's much easier than before to build a case now, a patent infringement or trademark infringement, and bring it to those courts than it was before. I had to engineer purchases in a very complex way to try to get Beijing or Shanghai involved, or Guangdong or Guangzhou City IP court involved in a case. Now these courts have legally expanded their jurisdiction to huge territorial swath of the country. That is, I don't really need to create very complex purchase tests to establish jurisdiction in one of those courts. So it's much easier to get good judges to take care of your cases. This is the message. Risk of double standards, how the laws are applied to foreigners or to Chinese, it still exists, you like it or not, because, as I said, IP is a tool now in particular that is used to support certain policies of the country. And I have seen, especially, I can give you a little example. Sometimes you don't need a big legislation to make the difference. In trademark proceedings, for example, in appeals of trademark rejections or oppositions or invalidations, I have European clients have no formal problems in filing appeals. But then come the US company and the Chinese authority, the Chinese court, the appeal court, ask very complex documents that don't exist in the United States. And we got crazy. We had to ask clients to write new board directives that change the way proxies are made and stuff, because American companies were not ready to meet certain demands. And I think those demands were made in purpose to put some more hurdles to American companies filing appeals. There's little things, right? They don't go in the news. These are not the big, but you can see sometimes a double standard. I have judges that whisper into my ears, I can't make this decision right now because you're a foreign company, or maybe you're from US, but we need to wait, or I need to go into lengthy negotiation with the court to obtain a court order for evidence preservation, stuff like that. It may happen. I mean, it's not something that happens every day. I don't say that this is what's going on in China, but you need to take stock of this if you're preparing an enforcement. I always say going to enforce in China a patent, for example, is like going to a horse race. You really need to bet on the right case if you want to win. It's still the case nowadays. It got better, but the challenges are still there. But there are people like me that are there to help you. So increase your knowledge. Fact-finding, investigate facts. Most of the cases are lost because we don't investigate facts. And as being myself, having this investigative background and experience, even in the most legally complex issues, investigations are critical in China. And don't expect courts or judges to do that. In China, you need to build up your own case from the beginning. There's no discovery. And there's very little transparency in this sense. You need to go investigate it. When I have a patent infringement, I always tell the clients it will take 6 months to prepare this case, at least. If it's very complex, it will take longer to build up the case and file it, because the moment you file it, you need to get it right, because it's going to be difficult to get a court to help you discover things or dig out evidence, even if the law now allows and force the defendants to give out accounting books and open records. I always say, how can you trust accounting books or an infringer? In many cases, they will be cooked. Even if you get the accounting books opened there in front of you in an audit within the proceeding, the court proceeding, it may be giving you figures that are totally negative for you. So you don't want to have that risk. Build your own cases. Fact finding is very important. Strengthen your portfolio, file your trademark, file your patents, etc., because you want to get it right when you do it. And I always have these problems that clients come to me, oh, I want to enforce, but you don't have a trademark. Or I want to enforce an international trademark, but you know that in China, if you have an international trademark only, you can't enforce it until you receive a special certificate, and it takes 3 months to get this special certificate, and then within these 3 months, I cannot start any enforcement. So you need to know the law, and this is the message, the first message. In spite of all the things you hear in the news about China, the relation with the US, the law is there. Many things still work and are working better than before, but you need to know them and you need to use them properly, right? So this is the message that I give to you. And I think this is also the end of my presentation, and I go back live.
Amazing information. So I'm not sure where to start, but we do have about 8 to 10 minutes of Q&A, and we do have some in the box. I think I'd like to start with somewhat paraphrasing at least one of the questions from the audience. And I'm thinking in terms of, I remember my first trip to Asia was South Korea, and basically the country was closed 30 years ago, I would say. There was almost impossible for any US company to do business there unless you had a product that would support a local company to export. That was kind of like the way. And everything was built not only on the tariff side, but on the non-tariff trade side, the barriers one after another, right? For South Korea, for Japan. You talked about the same thing for China. The question that I have is, well, relationships are important, and by the way, 35 years ago, that's the story in South Korea. Well, you can't do business here because relationships are important. And so basically that means you're not South Korean. So we're going to put every single barrier in your way, right? So I think, let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. Is there a kind of a logical progression that you've seen, maybe even the South Korea, Japan, and now China, where they've all kind of done the same thing, right? One barrier after another, which means what you said, you have to be really smart. Don't make bad mistakes. Know what these barriers are, have someone like you helping them. And then as the economy evolves, these rules start to change and make it a little bit easier. Some of the barriers come down and it makes it more possible. Is that kind of what we're seeing in China, where now we're going to see that progression over the next couple decades?
I would say yes and no at the same time. I think the gist of the presentation, if I can summarize it, is that China has improved this. I mean, the barriers we used to have many years ago, and I'm not an expert on tariffs or stuff, obviously, so I want to limit myself to technology transfer or IP, for example. We have less barriers than before. I mean, the number of industry that are considered key industries in the past for import or export, transfer of technology have been reduced. Now it's more free. Yes, it got better, but there are still key sectors where I don't see China relenting the grip on control anytime soon, because it's part of their model right now. And you have to, you're not dealing like in South Korea or in Japan. We are dealing here. And I don't want to even open this topic because it's a topic I could talk for hours because I love it. We are talking about a Leninist country where centralization and control of the Communist Party, control in this case of technology and innovation, is and will remain the main policy. And therefore they will always put that interest ahead of opening up. Opening up is an important policy. They will use it. And wherever they believe it's possible to do that without them losing control, they will do it. But I don't see in certain sectors like communications, artificial intelligence, they will try to retain more and more and more control. And therefore you will have more and more hurdles and more complex procedures to get, especially for, I don't say bringing in technology, because they will be very happy to get your technology in. It's going to be getting that technology out. And for example, the patent, the issue of where to file a patent if it's invented in China, even if it was invented, or the technology is owned by an American company. It has to be filed in China. This is one of the examples of the hurdles that you have. And it's difficult to clear that hurdle because they want that invention to stay in China. They want to control it. And this is not going to relent anytime soon. I don't see that happening.
So that was one of the questions, actually. Is that any different in other countries as well? You know, in terms of like if a Chinese company invents something in the US, they need to file it in the US too.
You have, of course, you have these controls in every country because things that are of national security interest. But I would say in China, the way the process works is more arcane, is more difficult to understand how the decision makers will come to the conclusion that they won't let this technology out, or they won't let you file it first in the US or in China, because it's not as transparent, the regulation in China, as in other countries. So yes, security checks is everywhere, but the way it is regulated in China is different from the United States. It makes it more complicated in China.
I see. But if you invent something in China as a foreign company, you have to file it there locally, but then you can file it in your home country as well, right? It doesn't restrict.
You can file it in the US, claiming the priority of the Chinese patent. You can't file it actually as an international patent, for example, because you're not unless it's your Chinese subsidiary who does that. So even when you come to, the thing is that many of this regulation favors Chinese companies. So even you as an international company operating in China, you will benefit only as long as you have a Chinese subsidiary there. Or at the same time, if you have a Chinese subsidiary in China and you are operating all your things in the US, you will still face restrictions to your business just because you have a Chinese subsidiary. So it's a double-edged sword, let's say like this. Yes, you can bring your technology back, but you need to first file it in China, and this has consequences on licensing, on exploitation, enforcement, etc., etc. Most clients don't want to decentralize patent management. I mean, patents are managed as assets. There are corporations and even smaller companies that set up Swiss holdings just for the purpose, or Bahamas holding just for the purpose to keep all the patents in those holdings. Because there's a tax purpose, there's a exploitation. The moment I have it in China, it breaks the whole circle, the whole economic and business circle of the company. And this is something maybe you don't want. So we need to engineer always. These are hurdles that in China are still higher than in other countries.
Sure. So, I mean, so I appreciate, Todd, who's in our audience, your questions, and you take me back decades when we had the same arguments with Japan. And it sounds like this is at another layer of complexity in terms of what the Chinese government has created to really create non-tariff barriers to anybody that's coming into China. So I think we all get that and understand it. But what I want to leave this conversation with is more on the hope side. And so where are the opportunities? When you talk to people coming into China, I'm assuming what you're saying is you should be coming into China in these areas. The market opportunities are amazing, and it's possible to do it. Absolutely. And so where are those areas? Where should businesses be thinking about coming into China? Because it's doable and it's possible despite all of the challenges.
Absolutely. I mean, I serve a lot of clients in the retail sector, all kinds, from cosmetics, home goods, fashion, apparel, automotive. We know automotive has been probably one of the most successful investments. I mean, if I think I have served several automotive clients in the past when I was in China in particular, and they have made a lot of money there. And there's space. There's a lot of space. China's growing middle class. China's increasing, spending, domestic spending, domestic consumption is going to become more and more a key factor of growth in China. Before we had the world factory, so it's all a foreign investment. Now the economic model shift to more growth based on demand, like like we have here, and there's a huge middle class eager to spend on all sorts of consumer goods. So retail sector, go and play. And we and all the colleagues, I don't want to be, if you don't want to use me, there are so many good people out there that can help you be successful in China. Just recently, I give you an example. China has abolished animal testing for cosmetics, for foreign imported cosmetics. This is a huge thing because until now, the only legal way for foreign cosmetic companies that were not complying with the animal testing standards to do business in China was through Tmall or JD.com or certain platforms, because China had created some island of protection. So they were exempted from animal testing if they were sending to individual people. So they couldn't sell to businesses. They had to sell to individual consumers. They were ordering, the mascara, or the 20 mascara, then it can be imported into China. Now, this hurdle has been removed. My clients, and I do a lot in cosmetic business, for example, and home goods, and like shampoos and all this home cleaning products. This is a sector where I'm very strong, aside from automotive and fashion. For them, it's like a new Mecca, as I say. It's opening. They're all planning by 2022-23 to have already 100 retail shops in shopping malls. So you see, China is open for business and is very happy to partner. If some US companies are reluctant, they have plenty of Europeans to work with, or new emerging economies that are willing to, like in South America, to do business with China. I have more and more Brazilians asking me, Brazilian clients coming up, or obviously Russians. China is open for business. It's not, but there are certain sectors. Now, if you're going to play, if you the company that makes artificial intelligence or telecommunications or certain other key technologies that may be relevant to defense industry, etc., that's another story. But for all the rest, if you're selling shoes or shoelaces or powder for food ingredients, the market is there, is open, is willing, and it's much better than before, because now you have a lot of people like me who's done 20 years almost of experience that can help you navigate this, these complexities that you have, which is cultural. It's not just the law. It's like, how do you go in a meeting room and talk to Chinese people? I'm not speaking the same in terms of language, because most Chinese will speak very good English nowadays. So you go and talk to them, but how do you behave? How you read their minds? How you listen to what they say, what they didn't say, that it could be also very important. So all these things, there are plenty of people around the world that can help you navigate this. Not only me, there are many. I'm one of the lucky ones that can help you.
One of the people in the audience is Bill Edwards, and you may already know him because he's been doing franchise work and business work in China and isn't franchising another example of an area that is booming? And now with the protections that you talked about around trademark protection in particular, it's a little bit, and even though counterfeiting is a challenge, there's better control over that. Isn't franchising another area that is ripe for opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a lot of eager partners ready to help you. And I don't want to say, because many, I work sometimes in a sector of the business that I call it the ER. I'm in the ER. Sometimes clients come to me when the case is rotten, when I have the corpse almost on the table and have to resuscitate. So sometimes I get that paranoid view that they say, because I always look at the downside of the business, but there are so many success stories. And I can say also, I know many success stories. Believe me, I got clients for 12, 15 years. They were so tiny when I got them. And now they're doing so well. They have expanded. They're happy. There are successful stories. So franchises, you need to trust your partners. You need to start business at certain points, right? And Chinese people are great business people. And that what makes also challenging counterfeiting, because they're so good at business, even when they go on the dark side. They're good at that one too. But I don't want to, because of my personal experience, because the job I chose to do, bring me in contact with the bad things, which is a good thing because I can warn you about it, but I don't want to say this is all bad. No, it's just my professional perspective, but I know that it's also very good on other aspects. So yes, definitely go for it, go meet people. But again, don't look only at the flow charts, study a little bit. Talk to someone before you go to do business. There are so many agencies that facilitate business nowadays with China. They can tell you all the do's and don'ts, and you can go a little bit more, knowledgeable into this adventure. Not just throw yourself there.
Yeah, we'll be disseminating information, including Paolo's contact information and your slides as well, right? Is it okay to
Yeah,
share?
absolutely. You can have them if you want them.
Fantastic. So that's how I wanted to end the conversation. Is I'm with you. I believe there's a lot of opportunities. I also think they're being totally unfair and creating barriers that are ridiculous, that can't stand. However, I mean, it's worth doing business there, despite all of that.
It's worth the risk.
The market
Absolutely,
is
it's worth the risk. It's worth the risk. Yeah.
So what I maybe one more question, and then we'll close it down, because this is something that comes up, and I know Todd Cornell, who spent 20 years in China and is our executive director at Northern Colorado, talks a lot about that. Many of us who have done business many years in Asia generally recognize, and that is relationships are important. And so in terms of what you just talked about, of getting aware of the cultural differences, how does relationships play into that? And is that one of kind of the stumbling blocks that people kind of trip over sometimes coming into China, that they're used to whatever their normal behavior is in the US market or in Europe or wherever they're doing business, and then they come to China and there's certainly cultural differences, which includes how to deal with relationships with people. How would you describe that, and what should people know about that as they enter China?
Yeah, this is a topic that I think so much ink has been poured on paper on the guanxi, what they call it, relationship guanxi, and it is obviously an important cultural aspect. I don't want to overemphasize it, because in modern times, there are many other things you can do even without having direct relations. Today, we do business online. I mean, people don't even meet and can still do business without having, but definitely building up a good relation, it's a critical step in a long-term business partnership, for example, with the distributors. And as an Italian, originally Italian, I have an advantage because we have a lot in common with Chinese cultures. We have food, we have
spaghetti,
family, we have clans.
Was spaghetti invented in Italy or in China?
Sorry? No, this I can't say. Who invented it, I don't know. But I can't say who invented it, but definitely we have this in common. And I always say in China, a deal is finished at the dining table, not in the business room. Right? It's the same as in Italy. I spent 3 hours in a meeting, nothing was concluded. Then you go out on lunch, and within 15 minutes, they're signing papers. So it's really, relations is important. You've heard probably, you make a friend of your business partner first, and then I would say relationship is important also for knowledge. In my line of business, for example, when I work, as I mentioned before, for example, I built up relation with police officers because they have their own interest to work with me, because they are really genuinely believing that counterfeiting is bad, and therefore they want to do something and it's good for their career. And I'm happy to build relation, and mutually is a win-win relation where I get enforcement done maybe in places where the locals wouldn't do it. So I get this guy from Shanghai to send his people to do it. And he gets maybe the best case of the year, and he gets a promotion. So relation is important. You like it or not, it's even in my line of business, where you think I'm always breaking. No, I'm the guy who breaks walls down. I send people to prisons, and I still need relations. And I have cases where police officers in certain police stations were not understanding law, and I had to ask friends if they knew the chief of the higher chief for that station, to talk to them, not to do what I want, just to explain to them the law. So, and things got better. So relations are important in any line of business, even in my ER room. It's very important to have relations.
So the connectivity between your Italian upbringing and the Chinese natural doing
helps.
business over dinners is a good one.
Flexibility. I could say this is a joke, okay? A certain moral flexibility.
I think I understand that, but I'm not going to explain it.
No, we're not going to go deeper into that. No, but it's just a joke. It's a cultural vicinity that I feel, affinity that I feel with Chinese people. That's why I'm not bashing China or anything. Each country has its own priority. There's a realpolitik, as they say, that governs our world relation. We're not better than them in many things, right? We also do our own interest, and they see us, and that's why. Yeah. Sorry, I drag it longer, but when we started those trade wars with the Section 301, the Section 301 sanctions for IP, non-fulfillment of IP commitments, the reaction of the Chinese, I remember the reaction of some Chinese officials at the Patent Office was very emotional. They say, how are you accusing us of doing nothing? We have changed so many laws in all these years. We have improved our regulation in so many years, and you're still accusing me that I'm doing nothing. There's a truth in that. Emotionally, we stepped on that. We didn't consider, we didn't maybe talk enough with them, or maybe we want to talk and we want to listen. I always say, we need to change hats sometime. We take our US hat or EU hat off and we put the Chinese hat. Try to think as a Marxist-Leninist. I mean, Xi Jinping, he wasn't reading Mark Twain. He wasn't reading John Grisham. He was reading Marx, Engels, and Lenin for many years. And believe me, I had done that reading too, and I enjoyed it. It's extremely interesting to understand communism, but not only from the American way. If you read The Naked Communists, or say you will bash on that, but if you try to understand, put their hat in your head. Also, when you do business, sometimes put your Chinese hat in the head. Try to think the way they do, and you will see there's some sense in what they're trying to say. You may still disagree. You may still find it unfair, but then at least you avoid breaking relations, getting on the emotional side, keep it business. And maybe you can make your reason better heard if you understand their own. That's what I'm saying. It's an educational process. And I worry about the new generation because if I look at these kids, China is not in their agenda. It's not in our education agenda either. But look at the Chinese families. The first thing they do is sending kids to study in the US. You have a generation of very nationalistic, China-loving and Chinese nationals who know a lot about us. But do we know as much about them?
Very good point. I love you. You're amazing. Great. Congratulations on your success and love your information. Could you just wrap up by telling us more about where you're located, what type of work that you do? I know you have an office in Shanghai as well. Could you just kind of describe that? And we'll be happy to send information for everybody through text.
So I left it for the end. I spent 18 years in China. I moved back to the US in 2018. And I'm located in Irvine. Our office is in Los Angeles. I'm based in the Los Angeles office, but for me, it's just a formality. I'm a man who lives in the clouds because I live in the global system. My team is based in Beijing, in our Beijing office. We have a Shanghai office, but that's more for corporate work. In our Beijing office, I have my major group, IP group, in Guangzhou and in Hong Kong. So my team spans through these 3 cities in China. I work at night, so I overlap with them. When we decided to move away from China for a lot of private reasons, after 18 years, I accepted the fact that I had to work at different hours than the other people. And we do everything. We do from filing trademarks and copyright and design and patents to enforcing them. We do contracts. Like one thing that I do, and I say this as an appeal because I got 2 recent cases of people that told me, my OEM stole all my trademarks and now he doesn't want to work with me anymore. How can I, or stole all my copyright and what can I do? And the first thing I asked them, okay, well, can you give me the agreement you had, the OEM agreement, this distribution? I said, we didn't have any agreement. It was all in emails and telephone calls. And I said, oh my God, you know. So like we do, like, especially for those who go do supply in China, not only we do non-disclosure agreement, which is the old-fashioned NDA. In China, we have the NNN, which is a special kind of contract that we do exactly for supplying agreements, because it's not only disclosure, but it's no news, no circumvent agreements. Because in China, normally the OEM will not disclose it to the public. They don't give a damn about that. They will take the grandmother, set up a new company, and send all that technology to the grandmother's company, and they'll start using it. So no circumvent, no news. If you go and do business with a supplier, get a written agreement down. People told me, oh, they have these rights. I didn't, you know, I didn't have an agreement. Now they're using my copyright. They don't want to give me the mold back, or because I don't work with them anymore, no molds back. They say the copyrights belong to them. And the law says, yes, the copyright belongs to the OEM. The law says it very clearly, unless you agree in writing in a different way. So you need a written agreement to make sure that all the further developments of your product by the OEM, all the rights belong to you and not to them. So this is a situation where we can help a lot, especially companies that go for the first time or go to China. Go with an agreement on the paper. Don't let them convince you that all is all right, that all is fine.
Dr. Paolo Beconcini, so amazing. Thank you so much for your information. We're going to end the program now, but I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This has been very educational, very informative. Everybody in the audience, you'll get an email with the information, the follow-up, including the recording and the slides. And so thank you for your time today. And we look forward to working with you going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, and sorry for the beeping alarm.
We're going to send you a battery, I think.
No, I need to change the battery, and I'm so lazy. I haven't done it in a long time.
Take care. Have a good rest of your
Bye-bye,
day.
everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.